Sidelines with Rob Brown. Talk sporty to me.
Hi, Rob Brown here with you on this Monday morning, day one of SEC Media Days. We are in Nashville at the Grand Hyatt. And I really wondered, does anybody in Nashville work? I bet there's a lot of tourists. The downtown area last night was like Daytona Beach at spring break. It was absolute insanity, but police everywhere. So Nashville, what an awesome venue to have this. We're at the Grand Hyatt downtown, and there's all kind of construction going on. Pulled up here, and I'm like, we're staying at the Hyatt. They said, well, there's 4 Hyatts in downtown Nashville alone. And I felt like the Beverly Hillbillies going to the city, but it is packed, absolutely packed. Day one of SEC Media Days. We get started here shortly. This morning there'll be a brunch. Of course, SEC Network is broadcasting live there on the second floor where everything is going on. Watching right now, Peter Burns and Chris Doering, Gator walk-on, Franz is familiar with, holds a lot of records in the SEC, and I know that you and Buddy and the whole Gator Nation are really proud of him, and he's really good. I'm looking forward to getting to see a lot of those people when we're downstairs on the floor. But we are broadcasting right now from our remote location on the 20th floor before we head back down there. But I want to say thanks to all of our sponsors, especially Miss Rubin's Rubs. You got the White Magic, the Black Magic, Seafood Magic, Creole Magic, and the Marinades. They're in about 1,000 grocery stores now. If you want them, go to your grocery store, ask if they carry Miss Rubin's Rubs. If they don't, ask the manager to come talk to you and say, look, get these rubs, start stocking them. You go to missrubins.com. Established in 1935 in Montgomery. It's a great story. I use these rubs on everything. Try them once and you'll be hooked. Miss Rubin's Rub. Also, rumbleboxinggym.com, 1835 Union Avenue in Memphis. Hewlett and Dunn Boot and Clothing Company on the historic square in Collierville, Tennessee. Gaddis Home Innovation. Look, if you're doing a home entertainment center, you want to get everything hooked up where you can control everything with a few punches of a few buttons. Gaddis Home Innovation. George Gaddis, I've known him, 45 years. Home entertainment centers, home security systems, cameras. You're working remote, however you run your life. George Gaddis, gaddishome.com, Gaddis Home Innovation. They can do anything with TVs, smart TVs, computer, getting your Wi-Fi hooked up to better speed. gaddishomeinnovation.com. Web-footed kennels over in Jonesboro and Bono, Arkansas. Chris Aiken, absolutely love this guy. You see him on the Avery and the Banded DVDs for dog training. I've known him 28 years. Notice my sponsors I have relationships with. I trust Chris. You will love having a dog trained by Web-footed kennels over in Jonesboro. Chris has an unbelievable support staff. That is the key. He's been doing this a long time. His dogs are happy. They get out of the truck, they're wagging their tail. Web-footed kennels, proud to have them as a sponsor. So we got more sponsors we're going to be talking about throughout the show. Again, today on the menu, it's going to be simple. LSU, then Missouri, then Texas A&M. This is day one. Prior to that, Commissioner Greg Sankey will do his annual State of the Conference address for SEC Media Days. Of course, he probably did that at spring meetings in Destin Memorial Day weekend when they were down there. But there's a lot happening. It's happening quickly. Follow us on Twitter at Sidelines_live. We do 6 shows a week, Monday through Saturday, 8 to 10 a.m. Central. Remember, 25 shows a month, at least 50 hours of content. We have a lot of listeners, a lot of viewers. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We appreciate all of our great supporters, okay? So let me bring in from GatorbaitMedia.com down in Gainesville, Franz Beard, and also Billy Roberts over in Atlanta. And we're going to do this week on a different schedule. We'll be doing 1-hour shows this week because we've got to get downstairs and be in the meetings when all the coaches are talking. You don't get a lot of chances, as we all know nowadays, to ask the coaches questions. They're sheltered. They're paid more money than movie stars in most cases. They are, no question. And it's hard to get to them. So we're going to take advantage of the time that we have around them. So, and what we're going to focus on this week, and it's pretty simple, and that is Billy and Franz, day one LSU, and I'll start with Franz and then go back to Billy. What are you looking to hear from LSU coach Brian Kelly? He won 10 games in his first year. Every coach in the last 3 coaches prior to him coming to Baton Rouge in this millennium, we're talking Lester Miles. I mean, Nick Saban did it. Lester Miles did it, and Coach O did it. Is Brian Kelly got what it takes, you think, to win a national championship at LSU, Friends?
Well, everybody thinks he does in Louisiana because particularly since Kim Mulkey won a national championship in her second year on the job. Jay Johnson won a national championship in his second year on the job, and this is Brian Kelly's second year on the job. So there's going to be a lot of pressure on him from the fan base to do that. And he beat Alabama last year. The cardinal sin of beating Alabama, which anytime you do that, that means the next year your expectations have risen to totally unbelievable, unattainable almost levels. Now, do they have what it takes? They got the quarterback to do it. They really do. I question a couple of other things that they have. They've got a really good offensive line, but they allowed 46 sacks last year, and they couldn't run the football. So I question again, does a year older make you a year better with that offensive line? It should. And if the offensive line can block and they can run the football, they get a chance to win. They got a chance to win it all. But if that offensive line does not get the job done, then no.
Yeah. Billy, you heard what Franz just said. You gave up 46 sacks last year. You start off last season losing by a point at the game down in the Superdome against Florida State. But the LSU fan base, their expectations are win a championship every year. And you look at Jaden Daniels as a quarterback. He and KJ Jefferson, to me, the 2 best dual threat quarterbacks in the conference. But what do you think about LSU in year 2 in a very crowded SEC West in terms of you got Alabama? They're going to be feeling pressure to do well. You got Arkansas's got a great duo of Rocket Sanders and KJ Jefferson. But your take on the Tigers?
I think that 10 wins a year ago is probably achievable again. That's probably what the level is. Beating Alabama 2 years in a row, not easy. Not a lot of history of anybody doing that. But Brian Kelly left a pretty nice situation at Notre Dame to come down there to take on a challenge like this. He's certainly capable. The cultural fit kind of stuff, you don't hear much about that now. You win and cultural fit questions go away immediately. So I think that, Franz mentioned that the local fan base has embraced him, not only embraced him, but have expectations now, right? Rather than questioning, like, what are we doing? Right. And so that's gone away. So I think it's not likely they're going to beat Alabama 2 years in a row. It just, nobody else has figured out how to do that except for Tuberville all those years ago. And so 10 wins probably is where they're at this year. That's my guess.
Yeah, and the question about cultural fit at LSU, Nick Saban came from West Virginia. Oh, how's this guy going to make it? He's a Yankee. Well, West Virginia, seriously, if you've been there, it ain't much different than Kentucky. We know that the Hatfields and McCoys had a little feud right there on the border. He identified with the people down there. He won, but that's what he did more than anything.
Yep.
He follows up with a Michigan man, Lester Miles. And then you bring in, after Lester Miles leaves, Coach O. He's one of them. He won a national championship. Friends, I'm asking you, when you think about it, is the term cultural fit that Billy referenced overused and just kind of a talking point that everybody that's interviewing uses now? Because there's a lot of groupthink in sports media. As Buddy declared, though, on the show Saturday, we're not using that term media as much. It's the press. I like the press.
Here's the thing, Billy said it exactly right. If you win, you're one of the boys. If you lose, you're on the next bus out of town. And I think the thing that they have embraced is the winning. I think that how he won is a little bit of a mystery to a lot of people because of the fact that he came in there. And what does he do? He basically guts the roster and comes in with all these transfers. But, transfers, building with transfers is part of, if you're not part of the game now, if you're not Alabama or Georgia, which consistently can recruit these incredibly talented classes, and they've got so much of a history of it, so much buildup of it, that they've got players in waiting, shall we say. We have coaches in waiting, got players in waiting. You got third team guys at Alabama and Georgia who would start everywhere else in the league. So everywhere else in the league has to supplement with transfers while they are building up their roster to where they can win with their own recruits. That's what Billy Napier's doing. 37 guys are out in 2 years at Florida since he arrived. They've brought in 17 transfers, of which 11 are destined to start this year.
Yeah.
I mean, half your roster will have begun its college career somewhere else this year.
Yeah. And I mean, Billy Franz is right about that. You look at, we talk about turnover, and it's not unusual when a new coach comes in for a third of the team or more to transfer out. I mean, that was going on 30 and 40 years ago. But you think about with LSU, how quickly they can turn it around. And they beat Alabama last year in overtime with a freshman tight end. So the expectations are, and we know from Frank Duffy, Mr. LSU Tiger, on here with us frequently. He's down in Cancun right now getting a little R&R. That road trip to Omaha, 29 days, I think, took a lot out of him.
Yeah,
and
poor
Bengal won.
on a bus with Frank for 39 days or whatever.
29 days straight. A 3 hour, it was like Gilligan's Island. We're going for a little short trip, going to Yellowstone. But if LSU gets to Omaha, we're turning this baby around. We're going back. But Billy, let's talk about, again, on LSU. Beating Alabama 2 years in a row. The interesting statistic that we all know, from 1969 until 2001, Alabama only lost in Baton Rouge in that 32-year period one time.
Yeah.
It's a crazy series. LSU goes to Tuscaloosa this year. Who's going to win it?
Well,
on paper right now.
I mean, if I had to go put money on it rather than just blow smoke, if I was at the betting window at Caesar's Palace, I would say Alabama, right? I mean, that's where it – I'll tell you this, though. Here's what I see going on with this transfer movement. There's two things that's happening in this realm. The coaches are so highly paid that they have to be in win now mode. They don't have the luxury of building a program, because the money they're making is equivalent to an NFL coach. So they're mimicking NFL coaches, and those guys rebuild their roster every year. They got free agents shuffling in and out. The Atlanta Falcons are doing that right now. They've brought in a bunch of one-year guys. They're managing some cap money and some things that are unique to the NFL, but nonetheless, they've got to win now or the coach isn't going to be around next year. And the college coaches are starting to mimic that behavior. So part of it is, do you take your chance on a superstar 18-year-old who's from a small town and thinks he's the greatest football player ever? Or do you bring in a 20-year-old that's maybe been in the wars a little bit in college and been in the weight room a little bit? He's physically mature, been knocked around a little bit, and is disillusioned about how great he may be, and he's willing to come in and work hard. I think that's probably a breath of fresh air to a coach. Like, let me bring in a 20-year-old that's got 2 years of seasoning. And, baseball does this now too. They recently had the baseball draft, and you see a lot of college pitchers being drafted versus an 18-year-old high school pitcher. And the reason why is these guys have gotten physically bigger. They've developed, a competitive set. They've got command of their pitches, and they could come in if they're a starter in college in the College World Series. Just a couple weeks ago, the Braves just took a guy from Florida for this exact reason. They think they can bring him up in one calendar year as a reliever while they groom him later to be a starter.
Yeah.
But, he can be effective now. They'll put him in single A for a cup of coffee, and see how he did. But they have a plan probably by July of next year, 1 year after he got drafted out of college, to contribute to the major league team and be on the 40-man roster. So that's what's going on. Everybody, the money's so big that the transfer portal is a little bit of a symptom of, we got to win now. 18-year-olds that take 2 years to get their act together and get away from mama's home cooking and all of that comforts of home stuff. There's no time for that. They got to have a guy that can hit the ground and hit the weight room and be ready to go.
Yeah. I mean,
you make a legitimate point because of the fact that, okay, like at Georgia, Kirby Smart makes $10.5 million a year. The president of the university makes 1 month of his salary. 1 month. That's it. Who's the boss at Georgia? But here's the thing, is if Kirby Smart were to encounter losing, people say, well, he's won 2 in a row. He's got a job for life. Let Kirby Smart lose a couple of years. He's not going to do it, I don't think, but let him lose a couple of years and watch how that fan base turns on him, how quickly they are. And the money has, Billy, I think the money has everything to do with it. Yeah. Coaches we used to say, okay, you got 5 years, 4 years to build your roster, and you better win big in year 5. Now you got 1 year to build your roster, and you better win in year 2, and year 3 you better win big or you're gone. And that's the way it's gone now. You essentially got 2 years to build it, 1 year to win it.
Yeah. And I think that the 5 year was probably indicative of the old let the coach have a full recruiting cycle where his guys that are recruits the day he gets there are now seniors. They're 4 years in, and he's fully embedded the program with his mindset and his schemes, his staff, his coaching style, and all of his own players. There's no guys left that were there before he got there. So that's probably where the old 5-year yardstick came from before the money got so big.
Yeah. And another thing that you don't hear on talk radio, it was commonly heard in the past was, now look, it's 2023 this year, but the 25 team for Oklahoma is going to be really good because all those guys are going to be seniors. Hell, you don't know what you're going to have 1 week to the next. If you're a coach, I mean, you're watching ESPN at night, you may see 3 of your players that you yelled at in practice, their names going across the bottom crawl in the transfer portal.
Yeah, I don't know how you coach a bunch of 18-year-old high school superstars now. I keep going back to Cowart. Rob, we've talked about him many times. Yeah. He was a single A superstar. He's a man child that, crushed everybody that he encountered, but then he gets to Auburn and they start coaching him hard and he wilted. And he's a big old baby, a 300-pound baby, effectively.
Yeah,
is what they
from
had.
Seffner, Florida, Armwood High School, 2A, I think 1A or 2A, Fran, but he got up to Auburn. That was 5A.
Armwood is a Tampa suburb.
That surprised me.
I thought he was from a small little area. Okay, well,
no. The Armwood is 5 right now is 5A, but I think back then they were 6A. Tampa's added a couple schools since then, but no, but you make a legitimate point whether it's 6A or whatever. He came in touted as the greatest thing since Kellogg's put raisins in their cornflakes. Okay. Yeah. And he was, he came in with all this hype and everything and all this expectation that he's going to be the stud, the superstar, the best that ever was. And, he was expected to come in and produce from day one. And this is what the portal does for you. In this respect, you take at Florida, where you've got guys in there that are plug and play guys like Taraja Mitchell coming in there and playing middle linebacker this year. He's a 5th-year guy, like R.J. Moten coming in at safety. You got guys you can bring in with experience, while your younger guy gets his taste. He'll come in the rotation and he'll get a few plays. He'll get 10 or 12 snaps a game. whereas Taraja Mitchell will play 45 snaps a game, something like that. And this is what the portal is allowing coaches to do, and the smart ones know how to do it. Brian Kelly did a great job last year of manipulating his transfers while his young guys develop. And that's what's going to have. That's what the smart coaches will do. You can come in there and you can flood your roster with transfers and screw things up if you don't develop. You got to commit. Are you going to have a program where the transfers plug and play while the other guys develop? Or are you going to have a program where it's all transfers all the time, which is what a lot of people think Lane Kiffin is doing at Ole Miss. Yeah. I think that Lane is going to live by the transfer and die by the transfer.
Well, and he's in a recruiting area where, it's a tough neighborhood. He's got Alabama right next to him and Auburn and, all the Texas schools. So, it's not like he's sitting in the middle of, obviously Mississippi has an outsized number of very fertile recruiting grounds. I'm not saying that, there's not a ton of athletes in Mississippi, but it's a small state. And he shares it with another D1 SEC school. And then Southern Miss is no joke. I mean, they get a number of players. So, right there in his own state, he's got a couple of significant programs, and he's got Alabama not far away that can come into any state and take whoever they want. Almost. And he's a guy that
LSU owns the Gulf Coast.
Yeah. LSU is I was going to make this point a little earlier too. It's the one program that I can kind of point to where, culturally, because of the fans, even if the cultural fit doesn't matter as long as he wins, I believe it's necessary for the fan base to see a lot of Louisiana kids on that roster. I mean, LSU is the big school there, and they kind of get who they want. I mean, Rob and I used to joke that whenever Auburn would sign a receiver or some kid out of Louisiana, I'm like, what's wrong with him? Because if he didn't have behavioral issues, he would have never gotten away from LSU. They would have taken him. So, I mean, we've been a little dubious about every big time player we've ever signed out of Louisiana, almost, with a few exceptions.
I've got the roster, LSU's roster right now, and I'm looking at okay, the starter is going to be Jaden Daniels, who is from San Bernardino, California.
Yeah, it's changed.
Noah Kane probably going to start at running back, although the kid who transferred in from Notre Dame, who happens to be from St. Francisville, Louisiana, of all things. He's right down the road. Yeah. Wide receivers, on and on and on. But the roster, basically, it's all about LSU, all about Louisiana. Now, they did bring in some kids from outside, probably more than they have before. This past year, they got, let's see, how many. One from Texas. Here's one from Miami. Another from Georgia. And another two more from Texas. And three.
I mean, they won it all with a quarterback from Ohio. So, I mean, they're probably a little more open-minded than they were, just a few years ago. But, it just seems like it's important to them that the people the kids they cheer for are homegrown kids more than most states. And I think it's because Louisiana probably doesn't have the people moving in and out of the state to the degree like in Atlanta does, which is a melting pot kind of city where everybody's transient, nobody's really from here. In Louisiana, they're still from there. I mean, that's kind of the culture down there.
But here's the other thing about Louisiana, if you notice how many high school teams win state championships that aren't from big city. Now, you had that run there with what was the Baptist school there out of New Orleans.
You know, great Evangel up in Shreveport.
Yeah, Evangel up in Shreveport. But for the most part, that's two classifications. Then you've got little schools like Meet, you got Kentwood, etc. like that. St. Francisville, Plaquemine, all these little places there. And I'll tell you what, when a meet plays a football game, and they're the place where Devontae Smith is from, I'm telling you what, if you want to go in and rob something and you want to clean the town out, just wait till there's a football game. Bring your gang in, because everybody, including the police, are at the ball game.
Yeah.
Well, it's like Gunsmoke. Everybody's at the Long Branch. So, the saloon and the bad guys would always go across the street. Let me throw something else to you. You're talking about Travis Etienne. He was from, I thought Travis was from a meet in Louisiana.
Jennings, Louisiana.
Okay, Jennings. Okay. But the big debate among all our LSU guys over at the hunting club is it's not Etienne, it's Etienne. I mean, they're very strict about the pronunciations, but Billy's right. But go back 25 and 30 years ago, and we're going to get to Missouri and A&M in just a minute because we're only going an hour today because I've got to get down to the different meetings. But Mickey Joseph out of Marrero, Louisiana, was a great quarterback at Nebraska. Remember Mike Stonebreaker, River Ridge, John Curtis. He went to Notre Dame.
The Baptist school.
John Curtis. Okay. Yeah, and he went to Notre Dame, but they had a lot of guys that went away. I mean, Warwick Dunn out of Baton Rouge Catholic in 1993 helped Florida State win the national championship, and his story is so tragic. After his mother, a police officer, was killed, and he went to Florida State and had a great career. Played for the Falcons, Billy.
The Mannings are a great example. They grew up in New Orleans, went to Isidore Newman.
Up on St.
They all rolled and went elsewhere. Now, of course, the Ole Miss thing can't be denied, but Archie Manning and the Saints are indelibly intertwined. And I'm sure it stung a little bit when none of those guys became a quarterback at LSU, including Arch.
Hilliard.
Yeah, there you
go. Steve Spurrier doesn't win a national championship without Ike Hilliard.
But we get a Duke Williams and we're super excited, and then Rob and I are immediately like, "What's wrong with him?"
He was from we knew. Yeah, but let me throw another one at you. This is a wild one. France, y'all remember the 1995 Florida-Nebraska game? Tommy Frazier out of Bradenton, Florida, Manatee High School. Went out there. No, look, you're not going to keep every kid in the state of Florida.
He got hit. And he's still running, by the way.
Exactly. That was one of the best runs I've ever seen. 1979, James Brooks had a 66-yard touchdown run in a 33-13 Auburn win in Athens. And as Charlie Trotman said on the Auburn Network, Phil Snow said that everybody on the field had at least one shot at him and they didn't touch him. But I still think he's the greatest breakaway running back threat in Auburn history. And I think about Eric Rett, Pembroke Pines, Florida, down there near Dillard, friends. And at the time, Auburn had James Bostic, Calvin Chop Dog Jackson out of Dillard, Brian Robinson. You had Frankie Sanders. And I was putting out, by the way, someone said most underrated athletes in Auburn football history. Who do you think is so underrated, needs more attention, love, whatever? You know who I put out there? A guy named Mike Edwards, number 89 from Bradenton, Florida, Manatee High School, on the crucial drive that led to Bo Over the Top, which was breaking the 9-year streak of Alabama beating Auburn 9 years in a row. Mike Edwards made a crucial catch over on the sidelines, kept his feet in bounds. I remember, I'm an idiot savant, I guess. I remember stuff like that. But Franz and Billy, let's switch to Missouri. We'll talk about Missouri football. Okay. Anyway, next, I'm kidding. We're going to talk about Missouri football as long as we can. No, Eli Drinkowitz is a very smart guy. He's from Alma, right next to Fort Smith. Both of y'all got to say this: Missouri has a lot of things going for them. They're in between St. Louis and Kansas City, the Cardinals, the Kansas City Royals, and the Kansas City Chiefs. Does that hurt Missouri trying to build a super football program, or do they just not know how to mesh it? Because I say it all the time with Billy. There is not a sports franchise in America, in the world, that does a better job of marrying the college fan base in their footprint to the organization. That is the Atlanta Braves country. But talk about Missouri fans real quick. Your thoughts on why they cannot hey, show me. It's the show me state, but they can't figure it out.
They're in the Southeastern Conference, and they are a Midwestern school. Make no mistake about it. They are a great fit for the Big Ten. They're a better fit for the Big Ten than Nebraska ever would be, because Nebraska is about, my gosh, you could drive 16 hours and you can still not get to Nebraska from any place in America. But Missouri is not an SEC school. They're in the SEC, but they're not an SEC school. They have no tradition that stands up to the other traditions in the SEC. They got a fan base that's almost like Vanderbilt's, like, did somebody bring the Chardonnay? Well, you don't drink Chardonnay and eat grapes on a tailgate. You eat hot dogs and ribs and
boiled peanuts.
Bald peanuts, yes. And
you damn right.
And you speak in Southern accents, and they don't even speak in Southern accents in Missouri. I mean, you get down around Cape Girardeau in the southern part of the state, and you get the feeling they are, but then you get up that way, and it's just not. And you look at how St. Louis, which should be a fabulous recruiting base, you look how that city has totally deteriorated. It is a burned out hulk. It looks like you have moved into a third world city that just got through with World War III. And it should be one of the great cities in the world. But their high schools are burned out. They look like, they don't get, there's not a lot of, there should be tremendous talent there, but there isn't. And the biggest reason why they struggle, Missouri can put 33 guys on the field who are talented, but in the SEC, you better have 44. You better have 44, yeah. And behind them, you better have 22 who could be if they just had a chance. But you better have a two deep that's ready to go. And they don't have that. They can put 33 really good players on the field. They just can't put 44 on there.
Yeah, and that's something we talk a lot about with Dudley Dawson, Hogville.net. The first 44 for the Razorbacks, pretty good talent. It's 45 through 85, and you're starting to see that number change. Just got a tweet, just got a text from one of my listeners who, man, he's got my back. This saying that Jimbo Fisher has family commitment, won't speak this morning, today, replaced by defensive line coach Elijah Robinson.
Really?
So interesting. And I hope everything is okay. I know they lost Terry Price, a member of that staff who I know he was at Auburn for 10 years, Ole Miss for 4 years. And but Jimbo not going to be here. That's coming out right now. But back to Missouri, friends. I spent a decent amount of time in Missouri. When you get in the boot heel, that's the Mississippi Delta. Those folks they are southern, but you get into St. Louis, and I worked for a company headquartered in St. Louis at Market and Jefferson for 8 years. Used to go up there, go to Laclede's Landing, there's 35 suburbs like Ladue and Brentwood. I mean, but nice suburbs. There's a lot of money up there, but it's all about the Cardinals. I'm trying to break that code, friends. That's a good description of it. And I've always said this. I think a fan base has to get angry, mad, put their fist through a wall when you lose in order for your program to be great. You got to wonder, how much does it hurt Missouri when they lose a football game? But fundraising wise, they're not on the same page yet. But they have an NIL rule in Missouri that once you sign with a school in state, you can start collecting NIL money. You think that would help them?
Well, there's a lot of things you'd think with Missouri, except for, I go back to the same thing. They're not an SEC school, and you're not going to get SEC athletes to come to Missouri. The SEC athletes are going to go to a place like Alabama, which has won national championships, to Auburn, which has won national championships.
Yeah.
Alabama, Auburn, Georgia, Florida, Tennessee, LSU, even Ole Miss has won a national championship. Arkansas has won one. If you go back to, back when the Stone Age, when they used to play football with a rock, they won one at Texas A&M, back in the days when they won it with a rock and everybody was putting nails in their sandals so they'd have cleats on the dirt. That's the last time Texas
1939.
Well, was it then?
Yeah.
Okay. I thought
it was 30. I think it was 39. Yeah.
I thought it was like 1739 or something like that, or maybe sooner than that.
Give them a little credit.
And here it comes. The Aggies are sitting there with their 1939 national championship. And by golly, here comes Texas, their hated rival in the league.
Yeah.
The only school in the country that has more money than the Aggies is Texas. Only God and the Longhorns have more money than the Aggies, but the Longhorns have it. And here they come in there. So you're looking at one of these things. This is another school. They are a Southwest Conference school playing in the SEC. Texas will come in here and fit in. Why? Because their tradition of winning championships fits in with the league. This is what Missouri lacks: is they never won championships in the Big Eight. They didn't win them in the Big. Well, they did win in the Big Eight back.
They've won 13 over the years, I think.
And Terry McMillan was the quarterback, who was from Coral Gables, Florida, by the way. They won back in, and let's see who was the coach back then. I'm trying to think who was their coach.
Was that Warren Powers?
No, back in the 60s. Oh, it was Pepper Rogers who won with Terry McMillan at quarterback. Pepper Rogers went from Missouri out to UCLA. But they really don't have a history of winning championships. They certainly don't have a history of winning national championships. And you're coming down into a league with teams that do have that history of winning them. And this is what makes it so hard to get over that hump is you got, like LSU has won 4 national championships in its history. Florida has won 3. Auburn has won 2. Georgia has won, I think, 4 or 5 national championships. You got the last 2. Then you had the one in 80, and then you had one back, I think, in 42. I think when they had Flatfoot Frankie Sinkwich and Charlie Trippi, and George Posner and Gene Ellenson. What a team that was! But you look at this, and you've got a league that has this really big history of championships. This is why what the Big 12 associate commissioner saying that, well, they had ulterior motives to go to the SEC when he was talking about Texas and Oklahoma. And the guy has got no clue. It wasn't just the money. Yeah, they're going because the Big 12 is going to be making $35 million a year, and when Texas and Oklahoma come in, they're going to be making $85 or $95 million a year. Yeah. Money had a lot to do with it, but there was another reason. You come in here, and the SEC last year, 8 national champions, 5 runners up. Then you bring in these 2 from the Big 12 who had 4 national championships and 2 runners up. So you look at that. That's 12 national championship teams and 7 runners up. That's the SEC when you add in Texas and Oklahoma. Yeah. Holy cow. This is why Missouri doesn't fit in. This is why South Carolina has struggled. But South Carolina won a couple of baseball championships.
Yeah.
That made them feel legitimate. They still haven't won one in football. They still haven't even won an SEC in football. Nor have the Aggies, nor has Missouri.
Yeah. Well, keep in mind, South Carolina, the only conference championship they've ever won was they were co-champions of the ACC in 1969 with a 7-4 record. They had their first ever double-digit win season with Joe Morrison, they went 10-2 in 1984. And then Steve Spurrier came and had 3 11-win seasons in a row, 2011, 12, and 13. Has some great rosters on there. But let's look at the championships. And then it's the schools that don't even claim the championships. Hell, Auburn could claim 10. They only claim 2. Alabama claims 18. They could claim 28, I think I calculated. But you look, friends, at that championship culture in the SEC. Texas, I believe, claims 4 national championships with Darrell Royal. And Oklahoma claims 7 national championships, 7 Heisman Trophy winners. And those 2 programs bringing in almost like 11 national championships. That's what the SEC, when they go out and bring in new members, they're bringing in, you could say they're bringing sand to the beach, but it ain't going to be any easier. And I think the learning curve for Oklahoma and Texas will be quick because they've got the resources to go out and get who they need to. All right, talking more about Texas A&M. Connor Wegman looks like he's going to be their starter at quarterback. But, last year, A&M had 4 or 5 really close losses. They went 5-7, but the cat was out of the bag early when they lost to Appalachian State, 17-10. There should not be rankings until about mid-October. Tommy Tuberville said that years ago, and I agree with him. But you got to do it for fan interest and for television and all. But A&M last year, they weren't that good. They had brought in statistically the number 1 highest ranked recruiting class in college football history. And now, since the end of last season, more than 30 players have transferred out. Yeah. But my good friend Olin Buchanan, TexAgs.com, love having him on. I'll see him this morning. Said even with those guys moving out, it would still be the number 1 recruiting class. It's just not the number 1 of all time. And you're bringing in Bobby Petrino, friends. You're bringing him and Jimbo together. That's 2 big egos. What's going to give?
Well, I wrote about it this morning. I mean, how far into the season before Jimbo takes his mic and does like that and punches the mute on Bobby Petrino and starts making the play calls himself. I think that's inevitable. And I think they were heading for a divorce with him. And, here's the other thing, too. You got Connor Wegman, who's got all this hype and everything, but you got a guy named Max Johnson there. And they actually played better with Max Johnson at quarterback last year than anybody else. And then he got hurt. But Max Johnson, people forget, at LSU, threw 38 touchdown passes, or maybe it was 35, and only had 7 interceptions. A guy whose dad won a Super Bowl, as a quarterback. So, you got to wonder what's going to go on there. You can over recruit. Dean Smith once told me, and this is back in the day when they had 15 scholarships. He said his idea was have 5 All-Americans in high school, 5 All-State guys who thought they should be All-Americans, and 5 guys to push those other that thought that, by gosh, I got screwed out of All-State and I only made All-County, And he says you have to push up there. And he said, but that was the ideal class, was it was broken up. But he said the one thing he had to do was you had to make sure you got 15 guys that came from winning programs. He would never recruit a guy that averaged 30 a game for a program that didn't win championships.
Yeah. Well, a lot of coaches like to only bring in players in any sport from programs where they won a lot. They're used to winning. That means that they're used to having to work really hard. Now, if you get a guy that's never really had to work hard, he hasn't faced much tough competition, they get into college and all of a sudden you find out in the first couple of days whether they're going to make it or not. It's pretty obvious. Looking at Texas A&M, Missouri, and LSU, they're the first 3 schools up on the docket today. after Greg Sankey's State of the SEC. And Brian Kelly, I think, is number one. We talked about the old days. You got 5 years to build and build your program. Again, when you come into the SEC, let's say you're Hugh Freeze, you're Billy Napier, the pressure on you is immense. And again, Florida and Auburn, I mean, Auburn's one of those schools that doesn't like to claim all the national championships, but they've been awarded 10 over the years. But you come to a school like that, the pressure, it's like living in the median on Interstate 95, that traffic. When you pull out of your driveway, you better be doing about 100. Hugh Freeze, everybody will say this, he's going to get 2 or 3 years. Well, hopefully, if he keeps recruiting the way he is, he'll be winning. You look at Jimbo Fisher. This is year 6 for him. If they wait until after the season, I think his buyout, people would have to pony up $67 million to pay him to not coach. $67 million to not coach.
They call up an old guy and say, give me your interest on today's bank account.
Well, I agree. Again, for a living, in addition to the show, manage people's money. I've never met anyone like that. I mean, they'll look at a $75 IRA fee. What is this for?
Yeah,
but I think that
this is
Texas. You're right.
You're talking about this is like the church tithe. Your booster fee is like your church tithe. You give your first 10% to God, your second 10% to the Aggies or the Longhorns in that state.
Yeah,
I mean,
it is. Brandon, you're right. It's completely different. But looking around at the pressure, A&M in this millennium has had one double-digit win season. That was the 11-2 year one under Kevin Sumlin when Johnny Football just came out and then just blew everybody away. But other than that, they have not cracked double-digit wins in this millennium. And it's been a while. They haven't been to Atlanta yet. Ole Miss hasn't made it to Atlanta either. Missouri, for all the criticism people want to give them, they joined the league in 2012. They did it in 2013 and 2014. And they got drilled 59-42 in the first year against Auburn. And then Alabama laid the wood to them. And it didn't work out well. But I think you just nailed it in your earlier comments about Missouri. That first 33 is really good. You got 85 scholarships. But the difference in the SEC, in the top tier teams, and since 1963, there've only been 6 SEC schools win the championship for the conference: Auburn, Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Tennessee, LSU. The front 7 on those teams year in and year out is 2 and 3 deep, isn't it? That's the separator.
That if you're not here, what's made Georgia, Alabama, and Georgia so good? Their first 44 are studs. They start anywhere, anytime in college football. But behind them, you got guys pushing them to the point that if a first team guy goes down, everybody says, well, it's the next man up. Yeah, well, that first team guy goes down. But that means a guy on that third team, that third unit, has to step in. This is where it starts. This is where it gets problematic for the other schools in the league, because the other schools in the league don't have that they got guys that are being developed. Alabama's got guys that are ready, that are all ready to be there, who are in that 44 through 85 tier. They got a bunch of guys. You look, Alabama only red shirts, typically about 7 or 8 guys a year. They don't do a wholesale red shirt. They do, and the reason being is if you got to take, most of those guys that red shirt typically are guys that they got. There was a guy that was a quarterback, okay, or a guy that was way too skinny, a tight end. That they get some tight end that's 6'6" and 215, but they know he's got to play at 240. Okay, fine. You're going to stay on the sidelines this year. You're going to pump steel, and you're going to get your weight up. And offensive linemen and defensive linemen. But they'll only redshirt about 7 or 8 of them a year, maybe 9 or 10 on an off year. The rest of them are already getting in those reps when it's blowout time. You know, people forget this is the biggest reason why people like Nick Saban and some of these others insist on keeping that game with the D1 AA team, because it's their chance to give these guys who are in 45 through 85, this is their chance to play in a football game and get meaningful snaps. They've been picking up 2 or 3 snaps a game. Now they can go out there in a game like that and they can get 35, 40 snaps. That's why they want this game. People say, well, they have a heart for the D1 AA teams and they want to give them a paycheck. Well, that bull.
Yeah.
What they want to do is
win.
What they want to do is beat the snot out of them so they can play everybody and keep mamas and daddies happy. Particularly in this transfer era time, you better have guys. You let your guys play, and these guys want to play and they want to excel, because guess what? They're already sitting there saying, I'm buried on this depth chart. There's 8 guys in front of me who can all play. This is my chance to get out there and get some tape so that somebody can see me and say, hey, we want you.
Yeah. Well, it's almost like you're getting a second round of high school tape in college. Even if you're getting to play in mop-up duty against the rental wins that you play on the schedule, they've got to have something, the teams that you're trying to get to recruit you to look at. And that's what we are now. You've got the portal last year. It went from December 5th to, I believe, January 18th. And then again in the spring, April 15th to April 30th. I think all told you had 60 days to go into the portal. Now, if you're a graduate, you can go into the graduate transfer portal, and you have for years anytime you want to. And that's what we got to keep our eyes on, is the number. Almost half the people that go into the portal are not picked up. I can't emphasize that enough, but you look at it out there, it's kind of like a winatorium for a lot of these guys. Now, if you're legitimately, you can't stand the coach, you can't be in the room, you can't watch him eat cereal, that's one thing. But this notion that you're going to come in there in January, graduate high school early, go through spring practice. If you're not first team on the depth chart, you're leaving. Well, it's gonna be the same thing everywhere you go. You've got to persevere. You got to pay your dues. And a lot of the young people that are in sports media have this flippant, Pollyanna attitude about NIL. It's just the way it is. Let me tell you something. Y'all don't have the money that the older people in America do have, and they're going to call the shots. Now, there are going to be people foolish enough to hemorrhage money toward NIL, but most people, they're going to want an ROI, return on investment. I know that. I live that every day, my career outside of this. You've got to understand, if you have a 17, 18-year-old kid that you sign in a scholarship, your school does, and you put together some NIL deal and he doesn't produce, watch out. But here's the real problem we're going to have. Wait till one of your school's big sponsors gets involved in NIL and the star quarterback has an NIL deal with him, and you bench him for not going to class or for breaking team rules. And he says, well, you better put Franz back out on the field or I'm going to pull all my sponsorships from the university. That's a potential conflict of interest. And I think it's going to be fun to hear Greg Sankey, because I'm going to ask him if someone else doesn't. What are you going to do with Texas? They're just doing whatever the hell they want to do. I understand about the sovereign rights of states. That's what this country is all about. Mm-hmm. But you have a conference with Texas and Oklahoma coming in. That's going to put it at 16 members. What about that? You're going to have 12 different states for the 16 schools. You're going to have to say, look, we're going to have some uniform code that we can follow for NIL, friends. We only got a few minutes, only going an hour today because I've got to get downstairs to all the stuff going on here in Nashville for media days. But that's something we got to watch out for.
Well, here I'll give you the perfect example. At Tennessee, you got Nico Iamaleava. There we are. I can say it.
Lamaliva is what I call him.
Well, it took me 3 tries, but I got it. But you've got him $8 million plus on his deal.
Yeah.
Now, what happens when Joe Milton comes out there and maybe has a couple shaky games, and all of a sudden the cry comes out, we got to have Nico. And all of a sudden you've got some booster who's telling Nico, hey, they're going to keep playing Joe Milton and Joe Milton sucks. What, we got to, I'll shop you around already. Your money's good with me, buddy, but I'll shop you around.
Yeah.
Stuff like that is going to happen. Inevitably, it will happen. What happens also if you get somebody who puts his NIL money in there and comes up there and says to a certain wide receiver who's picking up a good bit of money, look, I got about $80,000 that I just put on this game. And in the fourth quarter, if you're ahead by 3 points and they throw a pass to you in the end zone, you better drop it. You don't think that can happen? It's happened in basketball a bunch over the years.
Yeah.
And I don't doubt that it's happened in football at some point. NIL is going to make that not only possible, but probable.
Yeah, I'm concerned about it. And I think that's why I say the free market will work it out. I mean, when you look at anything, when you sign a contract in business, the big print giveth, the small print taketh away. If a student athlete gets an NIL deal and there's no written contract and you pay him that money up front and it doesn't say that he can't leave whenever he wants to, they're going to leave. It could be for 100,000. It could be for 5 million. You cannot operate in business with those kind of rules. Look, we're about out of time. Let me just say, again, thanks to all of our sponsors, Red River Ford Toyota, May Veterinary Clinic, all of our sponsors, Chad House Industries over in Cherry Valley, Arkansas, and especially our sponsors who sent us up here to Media Days. We're here at the Grand Hyatt in Nashville. Miss Rubin's Rubs, check them out. Miss Rubin's Rubs, the White Magic, the Black Magic, Seafood Magic, Creole Magic, and the Marinades. Go to your grocer, ask if they have Miss Rubin's Rubs. If they don't, say, order them, get them, I'll be back. You can go to missrubins.com. You can go to Amazon. You can order them. They're good on everything. Hewlett & Dunn, Boot and Clothing Company on the square in Collierville, Tennessee. HewlettandDunn.com. They've got a huge order of Filson. I was out there Friday talking to Charles. They've got a lot of stuff coming in for the fall. You got to head out there. Web-footed kennels. Chris Aiken over in Jonesboro, Arkansas, and Bono. Absolutely incredible facility. Known Chris 28 years. Web-footed kennels. Check them out on Facebook. They are all over the place, everywhere. Their dogs are happy dogs. Web-footed kennels. Proud to have them. Gaddis Home Innovation. If you're looking to build a home entertainment center, you want to have a smartphone in your hand where you can control home security cameras, television, everything in your life, technological advancements and all aside, GaddisHome.com, Gaddis Home Innovations. Check them out on our website. And you can find, when you're looking on here, Rumble Boxing Gym, 1835 Union Avenue in Midtown Memphis, corner of Union and McLean, rumbleboxinggym.com. The first of 3 locations, and Camp Lee is opening. They have all kinds of student discounts, corporate discounts. You need to get over there, rumbleboxinggym.com. They're on all these sponsors are on our website. And of course, Tom Martin's Body Shop, BB Patterson, GE Patterson, BB King and GE Patterson in downtown Memphis. Again, to all of our sponsors, to all of our listeners, Thank you so much. Most often we see the face of Christ in the least among us. Have a great day, everybody. Friends, we'll be talking again later today. I'm going to be putting live updates throughout the day from all these different media sessions. So there's a lot going on. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube. We're going to be everywhere. But again, we'll be here all week long in Nashville covering SEC Media Days. Billy Roberts had to jump off on a call. Fransbeard, GatorBaitMedia.com. Man, great week ahead of us. Great insight. We'll be talking with you and coming to you all day long. Thanks.
Take care.